And welcome to another exciting, rambling, unfocused tutorial that I will be doing. Today we'll be looking at the drum rack a bit, maybe some other things, probably definitely some other things, because I love to talk about other things when I'm supposed to be talking about something. Last video I talked about kind of some aspects of the bass interface. I didn't really get into too many individual devices except for the sampler. This time I'll be going into the drum rack and probably touch on some other things within the interface at the same time, not exclusive to the drum rack. So let's start out by putting a drum rack on our empty MIDI track, and it starts out like the simpler, like any sampler in Ableton. Oh, I should also mention, the drum rack used to be in instruments in earlier Ableton versions. Now it's in the drums category at the very top, just sitting by itself. These are all like presets. Wow, some of those are cool. Okay, that's exciting. So, yeah, empty drum rack. Nothing happens if I play some keys on the keyboard. First off, you'll notice that there's little lights lighting up on the side here. They're like little play symbols showing up on here. It's mapped to the keyboard in an interesting way from the bottom up. It's actually supposed to look like, trigger pads on the little drum pads that come on some MIDI controllers. You've probably seen them before. My keyboard has a little drum pad section in the top right that's pretty fun. So it works a lot like simpler, actually. And actually, you'll see when we drag samples into the drum rack, it will create simpler instances automatically loaded with the sample that we drag into the slots. So yeah, let me go into my samples. Good old Vengeance, I guess. I like Electroshock. Let's start out with the bass drum. It really doesn't matter which one I pick, but I'm gonna search anyway because can't help it. Sure, why not? So if I drag this on here, you'll see automatically this pops out. It's still within the drum rack, but it's simpler again. So automatically starts up the releases, 60 seconds, basically infinity for a small sample like this. No attack. Filters all the way up, not doing anything. The volume's at -12, but there's a velocity modifier here, so when I play the sample louder, or when I hit this key on my keyboard harder, it plays louder. It will turn up the volume to meet about 0 dB when I hit the key the hardest. Actually, it might be like 6 dB. I'm not sure how the velocity parameter scales. But yeah, so that's the default startup. It throws it into this default simpler setup. It sticks the sample in, and now it's over here on this. You can play it by clicking that. You can play it on the keyboard. Let me set up a 1-bar loop here, actually. That's just going to play this thing. It's going to get really annoying hearing that going away in the background, but here we go. 128 BPM. Let's get electro. Okay. Let me turn that down a little bit. So that's just doing its thing, no problem. And we can add some other instruments too. Let's try that. Let's get like a snare drum in here. Easy peasy. Kind of like that. Yeah, okay. And then I pop over here. This is something I mentioned in the last video. There's this fold button up here. What's nice about the drum rack is it's integrated with Ableton. So in this view, you'll see in fold, you'll see the name of the device that you have on it. Because when you throw a sample in, it will automatically name the simpler the name of the sample. So that's what shows up down here. I think you can like right click and rename them and do whatever you want with those. So but by default it does that. Awesome. So in fold mode, it'll fold it down to only drum pads, drum rack spaces that have anything in them. So pretty unimaginative, nothing special. So that's doing its thing. Now, if you want to switch between, basically what the drum rack is, each of these spaces, it's like its own track or channel, and you'll see that it is very much like that when I open up some of these other views that let you see some other parts, some things that are working in the background of the drum rack, because you can collapse all of this stuff down so you just get the drum rack. And you can also open these up to see all of the parameters, the channels, the macros you can map to different things, the actual devices on that drum rack slot. So to see the slot you have selected, you'll need to, what is this called? Show hide devices. Yes. So to see the devices on that slot, click this. It's open by default. I closed it. If you close it and you're wondering where it is, it's right there. So that's open now. And if I want to see the clap device, hey, it's right there. But what's cool is you aren't just limited to having an instrument on any of these slots. So say this clap, maybe it's a little bit dry, like I want some reverb on that clap, and I'm actually going to do this the wrong way just to show you that you can put effects here. There's a better way to add reverb that I'll show you later that you can do within the drum rack. That's pretty cool. But for the moment, I'm just going to put a reverb right after this clap. So not outside of the drum rack device, right after the clap simpler device. Kind of finicky there, isn't it? So right there. And now if I go to the bass drum, no reverb on that, reverb on the clap. So I can tune this in, pull down the dry a little bit, the dry and wet knob, so that I get more of the original clap and some of that reverb in the background. I can even, maybe I want some distortion. And those effects are exclusively on this snare, on this drum rack slot. So I've got my chain here, I switch to the bass drum's still all by itself. And, you know, then I can put things on the bass drum. Say I want to put an EQ on here. I want more of the snap from the bass drum. So if I can solo the bass drum by clicking the S down here. And you see the clap is still playing there, but it's, you know, it's muted because I have the bass drum soloed. And this does not affect the soloing or muting in the rest of your project on other tracks. It's only within the drum rack, which is awesome. So I can add some more. Maybe click to, this is extreme just to kind of get the point across, but you know, I can add some more click to the bass drum. And yeah, it's just, you can have unique effects on each, you know, channel. Let me get a hi-hat in here, because would like to have that for when I demonstrate something else in a moment here. I'll put it up on F sharp. That's pretty standard for keyboard drum layout, so I'll do something like this. This is going to be like the most cliche little rhythm ever. Within my clip, I'm going to do a little bit of velocity differences, so it gives it a bit of a rhythm and a drive. To duplicate these things across like I did, I highlighted these, only these, and I went into this too, so it's this whole beat here that's being targeted, I guess. I can right click or go to edit or Control D, and then it will duplicate that into the next space that's the same as that space after. So I can just, you know, highlight this, Control D, and maybe even highlight the whole thing, Control D again. I could have just like spammed it 3 times to fill up the section, but now it sounds like this. I'm going to go into the hi-hat slot and turn that down a little bit. I'm also going to filter off a little bit of the low end, so it's just that high, like, crisp sound. Don't want too much of the body of that hi-hat right now. I'm going to take the reverb off of the clap. Something cool you can do in Drum Rack is, I haven't talked about this yet, but there's something called sends and returns. I mentioned it in the last video. So if I make a return track in my whole project here, insert return track, and I put, you know, just a reverb, like normal, like I've been showing, then this little knob here, if I delete this, you'll see it leaves. And actually, all of these things, you might not be able to see them. So over here, on the far right, these bring up different things. So you have your mixer, your in and out section that shows where signals, audio or MIDI, are coming from and where they're going. So you can route things to different places, do some cool stuff with MIDI channels. And if you want to see the send sections of your tracks, then there they are. But if you want to see the return sections where it's actually sending to, you need to click that too. There's also delay and the crossfade, which is like for DJing and stuff when you want to crossfade between different tracks in a DJ set sort of scenario. And probably other scenarios, actually. But yeah, here we are, send and return. So on this reverb, on this return track, I've got this reverb, so it's not really doing anything. It's just sitting over there by itself. But what you can do is on these channels is you can turn up these send knobs and send the whole track to those effects. So if there's one reverb you like, it's like a nice space that you want to kind of layer over your whole track. Instead of having to put a reverb device on every track, like the drums, the synths, any vocals or anything like that, you just make a return track and then you can send different elements to it. I can send my voice now too, and both my voice and the drums are going to this reverb. And what's nice about that too is that I can apply effects to the reverb after the fact. So say that I want to do something like this and filter off the reverb. Yeah, you can't hear me like that. I won't do that. But yeah, you can do different things to just the reverb when, if you were in the channel view here, in the device view, you'd have to put things after. And then if you did like a dry wet sort of thing that I did to the clap earlier, then if you wanted to EQ just the reverb, you wouldn't be able to, basically, because it's only one line of audio going through. But since the return is split off over here, you can do things to just the reverb. So, and it's better for processing power, because if you have a reverb on every channel, that's going to eat up your CPU up here, and that's no fun. That sounds disgusting. And yeah, so the reason why I went into that little spiel with the send and returns up here is that there is a send and return section that you can set up internally in the drum rack. So normally your track looks like this. You have your drum rack slots and your devices within the slot over here. So but there's also some other things you can, what is it called? It's called chain list. Okay. So if you open up the chain list, then you can see kind of basically the chains. Like if you imagine it like audio comes from here, then it goes into here, then it goes into the next one, and then you could call that section of devices a chain, because it's audio running through the chain. And then so these are the different chains. Here's the bass drum, the clap, the closed hi-hat that I put on there. And what I can do with these is in this section, I can, turn them down. I can mute them, and you see it mirrors over here. So when I press solo here, it solos in this section, because it's doing the same thing, but it's just a different view to see that sort of thing. But unlike the slots here, where you can only do that sort of stuff, you can also change the levels. You can pan the bass drum to the right and the left. You can do the same with the claps. But about send and returns, you can't see them normally, but if you go to the left side when the chain view is open and press the S and R here, now you have a little section down here, drop audio effects here. This is a return section. So if I do the same thing, I take my reverb, put it down here, I can click on that to view my reverb chain. And, you know, I can do the same sorts of things over here, like EQ it specifically to what I want. So maybe I'll take some of the low end away so that if I send the kick drum into the reverb, it's not going to be too muddy. It's not going to mix with the bass drum. Just, I'm getting into mixing now, which is a totally other topic. And also, if your space is getting too cluttered, if you double click the title bar of a device, it'll collapse it down into a little space. So I've smushed down the reverb and the EQ. I want to see the reverb, but I don't need to see the EQ anymore. I'm just kind of leave that how it was. So that's collapsed. You can also turn off the devices by clicking those. But yes, send and return. So now I have these little sliders here where I can set my send levels the same as up here in the project. So I can send this clap to the reverb. And now there's clap in the reverb, and same with those hi-hats. So if I wanted reverb across all of my drums except for the bass drum, I can do something like this, where I have, you know, varying amounts of reverb across these different tracks. So maybe I don't want as much on the hi-hats, but I still want a bunch of it on that clap. I can modify that, and it's all going to the same reverb. So if I had this across a bunch of devices, if I wanted to change one of them while keeping the same reverb sound across all tracks, I'd have to go into every single reverb on every single chain and change it or copy and paste it over. But with something like this, they're all going into the same reverb, and I can, it's very flexible, the things that I can do with it. So that's really awesome. There's also some other things with like input output. So the bass drum is coming in on C1. So C sharp, D, D sharp, E, they map across the keyboard like that. You can change where it comes in on. So, oh, that's kind of cool. There's a list of suggestions based on standard keyboard drum mapping. Whatever, don't worry about that. But you can switch them around in this view. In the slot view, you can drag them too. So like if I want the bass drum up there or something instead, I can put it there. Or I could do something like holding down control and dragging something will duplicate it. You'll see there's a little plus sign on the mouse now. I'm holding down control and dragging the bass drum. So I can make a copy, put it over here. Maybe I want a different, maybe I want to modify the bass drum so that in different parts of the song, maybe if I make another clip, see this second bass drum here. Let me put these things back in. I'm going to copy those notes from there, go to this clip, paste them in here. So I can, whoops. Oh, okay, it was still playing the old clip. So up here in the session view, I didn't switch to play this clip. So now down here, that's not what I wanted. I wanted that. So now it's playing this bass drum instead. I can maybe add some crazy effect to it so you can hear what I'm trying to do. So now I can play that one, and it will play that old kick, and see it playing down there. Switch to the other one. Now it's playing the old kick. So you can duplicate things around. You can move them around. You can mute them, solo them, change the levels, pan them, all this cool stuff. Drum rack is really awesome. I think you can even do stuff like make groups within. Make group things together. Let me see what that does. Ooh, that gets a little crazy. Oh, that gets very crazy. I don't like that. I know what that's doing, but I'm not even going to go and try to explain that at the moment. That's a little bit crazy. But, very cool. I didn't know about that before. So, yeah, that's pretty much the gist of the drum rack. You drag samples in. I mean, you can keep it as simple as that, just dragging samples in that you like and then making little clips, loops, and stuff, and then you're good. But there are some fun things you can do with sends and returns and mapping different things. Ooh, here's one thing that I'll touch on. Where is this? So something that happens a lot in drum. I'm not sure what to call it. Like drum devices, like just okay. So if you have hi-hats, you have a closed hi-hat and an open hi-hat. You don't want them to play at the same time, because if you're playing the closed hi-hat and then you play the open hi-hat and then you play the closed hi-hat after, it's not realistic, because that open hi-hat is going to fizzle out like while the hi-hats are still, the tight hi-hat is playing over it. It doesn't make sense. So you can set up chokes, is what they're called. So if I get a big open hi-hat like that, I like that. So so if I solo those hats, hold control to solo multiple. Let me turn up these so we can hear better. And turn off the reverb. You can hear that the open hi-hat is playing over the closed hi-hats. So if you have in and out on, which is over on the left here, in the, oh man, what's it called again? The chain list, then you'll see this column here of just nuns. But what those are chokes. So choke groups. So if you put two things on the same group, if one of them is played while the other is still playing, it'll cut that one off. So if I put if I put the hi-hats both in the same choke group, when I play this open hi-hat, if I play the closed right after, you hear it's closing, it's shutting off the open hi-hat. It's kind of good for a more realistic drum sound. I mean, you're going to be using samples in here. I don't know how realistic the drum rack can become, how realistic it can get. I bet there's a lot of cool, you know, patching and routing and setup and stuff that you could do to make this sound pretty nice. I might even have some drum sets that sound pretty good. Maybe. I don't remember. But yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with if you didn't just have the simpler and you have the sampler, you could have velocity-based samples where you could have, you know, somebody hitting a kick drum lightly or really hard, and then depending on how you play it on your keyboard or what the velocity is set to on your clips, it will play different samples. So, but if you just have light, that's not possible. Strike that. It is possible, but you have to do a little bit of finagling with the grouping and chains and stuff, and that can get a bit messy, especially like for beginners and stuff. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the drum rack. I made my fun little beat there. That's real fine and dandy. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed. See how long I keep doing these tutorials. They're kind of fun. So see you later, guys. Hope you learned something.